I read out, a B Corp recruitment company, and they're aiming for huge deliberate overrepresentation from certain sectors. Doesn't there come a point when the white male says, you know what, this isn't good enough?
I suspect that many companies have blinked a few times at trying to meet both the requirements that they're supposed to meet on diversity and at the same time also bring in the best people for the job. You're right to flag that. The trouble is, it's very difficult things to say, and you do get judged as a business on how well you are dealing with diversity, what the makeup is of your workforce, just as you are being judged on your environmental commitments. ESG, which is the overarching, 3 letters, environment, social and governance, there is a really good reason for paying proper attention to all those 3 things. You made a valid point early, and I agree with it, and that is that if you take up too much time and effort meeting some requirements which are not directly related to your business, then you will not be giving the service to your customers that is the risk that your customers deserve to have. And I think that I'm on a number of boards. We have to pay attention to ESG requirements. We are marked on these by the governance groups, who in turn influence some of our shareholders, those who are, for example, the pension funds and so forth, will be influenced by whether we meet certain criteria.
No,
so
I can see that.
Right? Well, there's a point, but I think it's gone a bit too far.
Yeah, and in financial services, the Bank of England, the FCA, they're all signed up to it. Angela Knight, thank you for joining me tonight on this important debate. Well, Angela Knight saying there quite tactfully that it's gone a bit too far. I think it's gone way too far. I think it's blooming madness. And we're living in a global, competitive world. If we go on down this route, how long could it be before we have our own Silicon Valley Bank style disasters? Talking of disasters, stop the boats. Yes, this has been the big stop the boats week for the British government. Well, today it turned into a total carry on up the channel farce. All of that in a couple of minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We've been bombarded all week. Yes, we're going to send people to the Ascension Islands, etc. We're going to stop the boats. It's one of Rishi's really big pledges. Well, Border Force today, frankly, from first light and before, turned into border farce. I joke, not Mark White, do I?
Well, certainly it seems to have been pretty chaotic in the Channel for a large part of today. It looks as though Border Force were actually overwhelmed by what came across, and still, just within the last few minutes, I can confirm that the 12th boat of the day has now been intercepted and picked up, I think, by a Border Force vessel.
Well, that makes a change from this morning.
And taken it over, because, yes, what we had this morning was one Border Force vessel volunteer out there dealing with these small boats when they were coming across, Nigel, and that Border Force vessel broke down and so was out of commission. And normally these catamarans, they'll zip about, picking up sometimes a couple of boats at a time, back into Dover and out again.
Just to stop you for a moment, Mark, you say small boats. Have a look at these amazing pictures taken early this morning in the Channel. And these new boats are not small, they're big. I can't count the number on there, but it's 60, 70 people.
Yeah, this is the new breed of boat, and they have enforced the middle of the boat as well, the bottom of the boat, which was plywood before.
That was the vulnerable bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, which had a tendency to rip apart and sink. And we had these two tragedies over the last couple of years in the Channel. So now they've reinforced that. What does that mean? It means they don't all just have to sit on the side. They can fill that middle section as well.
Yeah.
So you're right when you talk about 60, 70...
80 even.
80 even is, what we've had on a couple of occasions in the Channel. They're getting more and more people on. And 12 boats, we think, today, Nigel?
So one Border Force vessel out, it breaks down, which beggars belief, because we've had rough weather, and all seafaring folk in rough weather make sure their boats tickety-boo. And so we have the Ramsgate lifeboat out, we have the Dover lifeboat out, we have the Dungeness lifeboat out, we have the Littlestone inflatable out. The volunteers being asked, effectively, to cover the Border Force.
Yes, and the complicated factor was, while those lifeboats were engaged in intercepting the boats and picking up people, acting as that sort of glorified taxi service, which I know upsets so many people, they had a genuine emergency with
people in the
migrants in the water, quite a number, and those lifeboats had to rush to deal with that as well. So it just, again, indicates how very serious the situation is and how dangerous these crossings are.
And then the ultimate farce.
Yes.
The ultimate farce. Boris Johnson turns up at Lydd Airport. We're going back to last year. The big initiative, and he's photographed standing next to a giant, great big drone. Look at it, great big blooming thing, the size of an aeroplane. And boy, does it make a noise as it goes up and down the channel. And what happened to the drone today, Mark?
Well, a drone... it may well have been that drone. It certainly, I think, was a sizable drone, crashed into the drink. It had some kind of technical malfunction. It ditched into the channel. Now, sources have told me that it has been recovered, but we don't know if it'll be workable again. If it hit the sea at a rate of knots, it may well be buckled and bent and inundated with seawater anyway.
Unbelievable. An absolutely farcical day. 12 boats, so we're looking at 600 and something, probably.
We may be a record day. The record was on the 18th of July.
Yes.
574 people crossed
we'll be
in a single day.
We'll be
so 12 boats, we think about 600 depending on how many were on each of the boats. So we could have had a record day on what is a seminal day in terms of, you know, this milestone that has been passed.
100,000 people have now crossed the English Channel.
And that focuses the mind, and not just focuses the mind, but it completely alters what was supposed to be a week in which the government were telling us about all the amazing things they're doing to deal with the small boat crisis. Now people are understandably fixated on the fact that 100,000 people have come across in just 5 short years. And far from stopping the boats so far, the only thing that's been stopping them, as we know, is the weather in the Channel.
Mark White, absolutely. And a couple of points to make, folks. Number one, it was GB News that led with the story that we'd crossed the 100,000 number, and it was GB News for hours that led with the story that it was the drone that had crashed into the English Channel. The other broadcasters miles and miles behind in terms of being on top of this story. You want to find out what's going on the Channel? We are the place to come to. And I'm going to say this. In 2020, in the spring, I started to look at this issue. I went out into the Channel and I filmed. And I understood that basically nobody who came illegally was being deported. And I said then, you might as well put a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying everyone welcome. I said this had become a big issue. Sadly, I've been proved right. Now, we are a nation of dog lovers, but I'm not sure all of our owners are very good. I'm not sure all of the breeds are entirely safe. And I'm not sure that lockdown has done any of this much good. And incredible, I'm really surprised by this, 9,000 people in 2022 were treated in hospital for dog bites and dog attacks. It's a growing problem. In a moment, we'll try and find out what can be done.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, I'm joined tonight in the studio, live. I've got Pippa with me, Vix with me, but far more importantly, I've got the Cocker Spaniel, Olive, with me, and they're from the Best Behaviour School for Dogs, and this is a very real subject. 9,000 people treated for bites and attacks, and that is exactly double the number from 1998. And we were chatting before. Did you say 50% increase on attacks on postmen, for example?
Yeah, very high.
So what's going on here? I mean, during lockdown, it seemed, and I did it, buying a dog. No. I mean, you're right. But during lockdown, people bought dogs. We know there were the puppy farms. There were puppies being produced on a huge scale. We know that a lot of people who bought dogs had never owned them before. It was also quite difficult to socialise dogs, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Also, you couldn't go into people's houses. You couldn't necessarily. You had a length of time that you could be out for a walk. But actually, I think first and foremost, we as behaviourists certainly believe that. I just think people don't really understand dog behaviour. And very sadly, only a few, as sort of 1 in 10 people actually seek a training class or a behaviourist. So you're not going to understand what your dog's behaviour means, are you, as you go along? And yeah, it's lovely people.
Only 1 in 10 who buy a dog.
1 in 10. Seek professional
advice. Any
advice.
sense of training or understanding?
Absolutely. So
you're suggesting, in a sense, that this problem is more a problem of the owners than the dogs?
For sure. And I suppose as well, the cost of living crisis, people aren't always able to afford the help of maybe an extra of a trainer or a behaviourist. But even just appropriately run puppy classes would be good, and they're relatively inexpensive. I think if you're paying out to get a puppy, that should be included in the price.
Actually, dog food's not cheap, is it?
No, absolutely. And we were saying before, weren't we, that so much of it as well comes down to food, exercise, mental stimulation. If you're giving your dog everything that it needs for a happy and healthy life, Olive's in here for the treat.
The very good treats.
Absolutely. Then your dog will be well balanced. But if you're feeding, if you can't afford to buy good dog food, as you say, they are expensive, then maybe they're not getting the right food. And then if they're not getting the right appropriate amount of exercise for their age and breed, then all these things play a major part in the behaviour that they're showing.
But there's also a big issue, isn't there? And we've seen some of this in the newspapers, 1 or 2 of the tabloids running this story repeatedly. And we've had these arguments before about various breeds of dog. Currently, it is the American Bully dog that we're talking about, and 9 people have been killed. Killed by this, not just wounded. I mean, goodness knows how many have been to hospital. 9 people have been killed by this breed of dog in the last 2 years. So what do we do?
It is devastating, without doubt. And I think because these big dogs they're powerhouses and they can cause so much damage. And when you hear of what's happened, it is terrifying. In our experience as behaviourists, all of this, the majority of behaviour, 90% of our work with aggression is nervous aggression. And that can be just as prevalent, if not more so, in the smaller dogs, maybe the spaniels or the collies or the little nippers. And people don't always get the behaviour countered because they are a smaller dog. So in our experience, we very rarely deal with something like an XL bully. We are far more treating breeds like the spaniels or the cockapoos, the anxious-natured dogs, rather than the breeds.
But should we be allowing breeds like the American Bully in this country?
It's a hard... I mean, I think the devastation that these breeds can deliver with a bite and they're guard dogs, is a hard question to answer.
Yeah. No, I didn't pretend it was easy. But it is serious.
I mean, there wouldn't be a breed that, if we're called in to deal with, we'll be looking forward to our work that day. Put it that way. No. If it was a Cocker Spaniel, the same nervous aggression, we would be rather dealing with a Cocker Spaniel for very obvious reasons.
For obvious safety reasons. So, from what you're telling me, there is really almost no prospect right now of this problem getting any better, because we've got a huge number of dogs, much bigger number of dogs in circulation than there were before. Lockdown, only 10% of people have got any basic training or any idea. Many of the buyers have never had a dog in their lives, and they mean the best, but they don't understand what they're doing. So there's no end to this problem, is there?
Well, there are two things that we're doing.
All right, go on.
So, dare I say it? So one thing, we've got full accreditation to the CFBA, which is one of the elite organisations in the UK. So actually you can get the...
CFBA, explain.
Canine and Feline Behaviour Association.
OK.
Sorry. And if you are a member of this association, you can... if you have a behaviour consultation from one of us, a member of this association, if you have dog insurance, you can get the money back on your pet insurance. So actually you're not having that dichotomy of, my dog's doing this, but I can't afford it, because you can actually get the money back if your dog is insured.
Okay.
So that's one thing, though, that we really want to be able to highlight.
Absolutely.
And then also...
But also we've got our campaign of prevention of dog bites, really, isn't it? Which we've been launching in schools, going around to schools within Kent, taking dogs, such as Olive, and teaching the children at a very early age how to interact with a dog, how to behave around a dog, how to read a dog's body language, showing slides of, does this dog look like it's enjoying it, enjoying this cuddle, should you approach this dog, all that sort of thing. So hopefully really educating people and getting the message out there of how they...
We'd love to be able to roll this out throughout Kent. And also kids clubs, Brownies, Cub Scouts, and also if other behaviours do it in other areas. So I think it's education, isn't it?
OK. Fair dues. Thank you for joining me. And, it is a growing problem. So, folks watching this, listening to this, if you've got a dog during lockdown and you know in your heart of hearts you don't really know what you're doing, go to a dog behaviourist, get some training. Otherwise, you might regret it. Now, some people must be regretting having voted for Joe Biden, I would have thought, at the last presidential election. Here he was once again, this time in the great state of Utah. Have a listen to this.
The Grand Canyon, one of the Earth's 9 wonders of the world. Literally. Think of that. It's amazing.
It just gets worse. It just gets worse. It's one of the 9 wonders of the world. Even Joe Biden doesn't know that it's 7. And another rather more serious one. So, what the Farage moment? Chris Bryant, or should I say Sir Chris Bryant, and, a very important member of Parliament, and there he is, chairman of the Privileged Committee, and he's publishing a book about what's going on in Parliament. He thinks this Parliament, in terms of behaviour, could be one of the worst ever. Not just because of MPs' behaviour and the discipline they receive, or the suspensions they receive, or the forced resignations, but because of the lies they tell. And here he was on Good Morning Britain this morning, setting himself up as the moral arbiter for all that should happen in Parliament.
That you've normalised lying to Parliament. If you have a Prime Minister and ministers repeatedly misleading the House of Commons and refusing to correct the record, of course, people... We've all done it. We've said million instead of billion, or we've managed to get a statistic wrong for whatever.
Or you've been
reason.
advised wrongly.
It might be. All
can
of that.
Be, yeah.
But then you correct the record. That's the rule. You correct the record.
So you get it wrong, you correct the record. Yeah, that works. However, this was Chris Bryant in the House of Commons last year.
I don't understand why Aaron Banks, frankly, isn't on the list either. Even Isabel Oakeshott now thinks that he is an agent of influence for the Russian state. And I simply point out that Nigel Farage received from Russia Today £548,000, £573 in 2018 alone from the Russian state.
I didn't receive a single penny in 2018 from Russia Today or the Russian state. It is wrong. Frankly, it's an outright lie. You've said it, Sir Chris, using parliamentary privilege. If you're going to go out and flog this book about standards in public life and go on major TV programmes in this country like Good Morning Britain and say that anyone that makes a mistake and gets it wrong should correct it, you'd better correct it pretty soon. Or, do me a favour, Chris, say it outside the House of Commons. I wouldn't mind the money to buy a new car. In a moment, it's Talking Pints. I'm going to be joined by a very controversial but a very colourful character. He's just married in Rwanda. He's got a lot of stories to tell. Simon Danshuk joins me in a moment for Talking Pints.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media.
We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's Thursday nights, Talking Pints. I'm joined by former Labour Member of Parliament, Simon Danchett. Simon, welcome.
Good to see you.
To the programme. Now, there you are, a young lad, a young Lancastrian.
Yeah.
With political ambitions from an early age.
Very early, from about 14, yeah. I wanted to be a parliamentarian, in actual fact, yeah. Brought up in a very working-class family, one-parent family. My mother brought me and my older brother up. But I got a taste for politics very early on for some reason.
And yet, academically, you didn't exactly shine, did you?
No, not initially, no. I left school at 16, no qualifications. Worked in a factory making gas fires, in a factory in Padiham near Burnley. There's about 1,000 people work there then. There aren't factories or jobs like that in the country anymore, are there? Manufacturing.
No.
But that's what I did. It was a closed shop. You had to join the trade union. But what I did do is go to college at night, and I got the qualifications I should have got when I were at...
So why did you fail at school?
Well, I think really I wasn't paying attention. My home life was pretty desperate, if I'm honest about it, very poor. So I wasn't very focused. And I didn't perform. You know, my mother didn't really instill in me the importance of education, I don't suppose.
But it worked, because you worked your way up and you got elected, you know, on the local council.
Blackburn, yeah.
Blackburn, yeah. You,
27.
You did your bit, you know, but your attempt to get into Parliament, and of course, Rochdale had that Liberal tradition. Cyril Smith, we'll come back to him.
Yep.
Liz Lynn, of course, had been a Liberal Member of Parliament for Rochdale, and it was a Liberal-held seat in 2010. And you had a visit.
This is true.
You had a visit from a chap who was the Prime Minister. Must have felt quite a big deal, the Prime Minister coming to help Simon Danshuk to get elected. But it all went a bit wrong, didn't it?
That's right. I'd been selected as the parliamentary candidate in Rochdale in 2007. So I was knocking on doors for 3 years. We get to 6 weeks before the general election in 2010, a phone call saying that Gordon Brown were going to visit, help me get elected, beat the Liberal MP that's sitting there. He turns up, he leaves his microphone on when he gets in the car. Who put me with that bigoted woman? Gillian Duffy.
Gillian Duffy. And it just became the story.
Absolutely.
It was the front page of every national newspaper. The row ran on and on and on. So you kind of got elected to Parliament despite Gordon Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll appreciate this story. I mean, when I found out about it later that day, I'd given up smoking for the duration of the campaign. I drove to the local co-op, bought 20 Marlboro Lights, sat there on my own in the car, thinking, what's gone wrong? I've wasted 3 years of my life campaigning. But we managed to win it by just over 800 votes.
It was a whisker, wasn't it?
Yeah, out of 76,000, yeah.
And you get into Parliament, Simon, and you get involved in campaigns, and it starts in a way with Rochdale, because you write a book about the late Cyril Smith, who was a really quite monstrous man, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So I arrive into Parliament 2010. Couple of years in, the Rochdale grooming scandal.
Yes.
Predominantly Pakistani men abusing white working class girls, no doubt about that. But then I made a speech where I drew a parallel, because I'd learnt during my time from Burnley, not from Rochdale, but during my time in Rochdale, I'd learnt that Cyril Smith was an abuser. So it was commonly talked about. I hadn't known until I arrived in the town itself. And I made a speech where I compared the two. So they got away with it because they were abusing poor white working class girls. And it was for whatever reason, the police and the authorities ignored the abuse that was going on. He got away with it because he was abusing poor white working class boys, and the authorities ignored that as well. So there were parallels between the two. And then, as you say, in 2014, I published Smile for the Camera, The Double Life of Cyril Smith, which exposed everything that he'd done in terms of abuse and his politics and everything.
Yeah, and suddenly you're there as a backbench member of Parliament in your first term, but you suddenly become a very high-profile figure as a result of that. And there's a bigger debate goes on about historic sexual allegations against very senior members of the British establishment. But the point is, Simon, in the end, many of them proved to be untrue, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there was the Carl Beach testimony,
yes,
and there were, old men whose last years of their life were made miserable.
Absolutely.
Getting the balance of this stuff's important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, and this is where I differ, because Tom Watson took a very different view. Carl Beach, or Nick as he was known to the media, had actually contacted my office to have a conversation about the allegations he wanted to make. And my colleague, researcher Matt Baker, had a phone conversation with him and came back to me, and Matt Baker says, I don't believe a word the guy's saying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you left that alone?
We left it well alone. Yeah. That's a known fact. We left it well. Why Tom took it up as an issue, I do not know.
No.
But my latest book, Scandal at Dolphin Square, which is quite humorous. It deals with all these different scandals. Sid James, Barbara Windsor having an affair there. Oswald Mosley, leader of the fascists, lived there during the 30s. So there's about 100 scandals in there. But we do deal with the Carl Beach issue as well. Yeah. And we said that he was a complete fantasist and rightly put in prison.
Simon, you showed good judgment over that. But after 2015, you started to show some quite bad personal judgment. I mean, let's be frank, you were the tabloid's dream. I mean, it was Danshuk week after blooming week. Danshuk with this woman, Danshuk with that woman, Danshuk did this, did that. Some of it, let's be frank, not terribly discreet.
No, absolutely. And you know as well as I do what the tabloid newspapers...
Oh, I've been there.
Absolutely, what they can be like. And I got the full force of that. I'd gone through a divorce with my second wife. That had been difficult. I'd suffered from mental exhaustion, depression, in fact, as a consequence of dealing with some of the issues that I was dealing with in terms of historic child abuse and things like that. I struggled to deal with that. Wasn't really my subject.
Being an MP get people down?
I think it can do. You're away from the family. My youngest child was born 6 weeks before the general election. So I'd hardly ever seen him. If you were based out in the north of England and you're back at the weekend, but you know what it's like campaigning, you're out all the time, makes home life very difficult. So it can be depressing, literally depressing.
Yeah, and anyway, as I say, you were never-endingly in the tabloids, and it made, well, let's be frank, very good copy for them. But you sort of survived it all. But that was it. 2017, the Labour Party didn't really want you anymore, did they?
Yeah. No, that's right. And the real truth around
How did that feel?
Well, I'd been a critic because my politics...
Didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, did you?
No, certainly didn't. No, that's the point. I'm traditional right-wing Labour. Tough on illegal immigration, tough on benefit cheats, and never got that when I arrived in Parliament in 2010. We ended up with Ed Miliband as leader, soft left. And then when he loses in 2015, which I predicted, and I'd been a critic of his, I'd been a supporter of his brother David, who would have made a much better leader. Ed loses, and then Corbyn becomes leader. So I was always opposed to this North London Labour approach, which we've still got under Keir Starmer, not as radical, crazy as Corbyn, but nevertheless not my kind of Labour politics.
So that was it.
We
with
parted
politics.
ways. Yeah.
And you've been ever since then doing media, goodness knows what. But a recent, quite extraordinary event. I mean, only Simon Danshuk could do this, really. So you finish up marrying a Rwandan beauty consultant, Claudine. What's that all about?
She's beautiful on the inside and outside. She really, in my view, in my humble view. I was over there on...
Great pictures.
Oh, yeah, we just had the wedding quite literally not a week ago or something, But yeah, I met her. I was over there on business in March 2022. We met, kept in touch. I went over again, I think, in May, June 2022 for Chogham Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Spent a couple of weeks there, and the relationship just blossomed. And so that's where we're
a week into the marriage. Many congratulations. But there's an issue with her visa, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we applied for a visitor visa last September. Which was refused, and they refused it. They didn't believe she would go back to the country. She thought she would stay here illegally. They didn't take into account our relationship. We provided loads of evidence about the relationship that we were in, and they dismissed it. And on a visitor visa, you can't appeal it. So you pay your money, you take your chance. But what really frustrates me about this, and I wrote an article at the time, actually, it's easier to come into Britain illegally.
Well, today, 600 have today.
Absolutely. It's easier to come into Britain illegally than it is legally and for love. That's the reality of the country that we live in.
You will sort this out, though, won't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and she'll be joining us very soon. I have no doubt about that.
Well, I have to say, Simon, a fascinating, short career in elected politics, but a fascinating one.
Yeah.
As I say, not many backbenchers become household names, but you absolutely did that in lots and lots of ways. And I want to wish you a very successful marriage to Claudia.
Cheers.
And thank you for joining me.
Cheers,
on
Nigel.
Talking Pints. Well, that's pretty much it from me this evening. But stick with GB News because, of course, we have the Mogster coming up next, live from his country house down in Somerset, God's own county, as he keeps on calling it. There he is, giggling away. Jacob, what have you got tonight?
Well, we're going to be talking about the Magistrates Association setting out its style guide and enforcing language on us. Language is so important. Language is desperately political, and the Magistrates Association ought to be apolitical. So that's going to be one of the major topics, and then we're going to talk about the ECHR and whether the time has come to pull the plug on an overseas version of human rights.
And Jacob, in your opinion, has that time come?
I think we need an election to do it. I think you need a clear mandate, and I don't think there's a majority in the current House of Commons. But in my own mind, the system we've got at the moment just doesn't work.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, but there we are. Parliament's always out of touch. Now, after one of the busiest months' work of my life with the whole banking stuff, I am off right now to have a weekend away with the family. I can't wait. I want to know, what's the weather going to be?
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest broadcast for GB News. I'm Greg Dewhurst. We're going to see increasing risk of showers as we move towards the weekend, but there will be some sunny spells, just turning a little cooler too. If we look at the bigger picture, this area of low pressure moves in another area of low pressure for the weekend, bringing the risk of showers, though not as windy as recent weekends. For this evening, it's been fine end to the day for many, but we do have this area of rain pushing north and eastwards. It could be heavier for a time across Northern Ireland as it crosses into Scotland too. Elsewhere, generally quite a cloudy, warm, muggy night to come. A lot of cloud around, some drizzle over the hills. Temperatures remaining in double figures, 17, 18 degrees is a low for some of us. Bit of a cloudy start to Friday, still some rain across Scotland, heavy at times, pushing away northeastwards, and then slowly through the morning it starts to brighten up. We could see this area of cloud push into southeast England though to give some showery rain for the afternoon. Elsewhere, bright afternoon, sunny spells and scattered showers, turning breezy around western coast, making it feel a little cooler here. Still highs reaching 27 degrees towards East Anglia. And then Saturday, this low approaches us, gives spells of rain across the north and the west of the UK as the winds pick up. Best of the drier, brighter weather holding on towards the southeast. But even here, we'll see some showers moving in later on in the day and quite blustery. Temperatures a little cooler too, and that continues into Sunday and Monday with further showers and temperatures a little below average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate.